here with us again. And you guys, if you came to the wellness seminar that we had last year, you would have just seen what a phenomenal speaker in person that she is. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katy. And we are so glad that you're here. Even though you won't hear them, you'll know that there's a lot of virtual applauses going on out there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that awesome introduction. Thank you for having me today. I want to lead by just acknowledging everyone for being here today. You know, we have a lot of demands right now, and we can spend our time and energy a lot of different ways. So I think it says a lot that you draw such awesome participation at noon on a very big day. So thank you. I acknowledge you. I appreciate you being here. Again, my name is Katy. I'm going to go ahead and set up my screen share, and hopefully this goes effortlessly. We are talking today about workplace wellness in a virtual world. I'm just going to see if Zoom will cooperate here so I can set this up in slideshow mode. There we go. So workplace wellness in a virtual world. I cannot wait to dive into this topic with you. I'll tell you just a little bit about my business and about myself. So Wellness Collective, we are a certified woman-owned business, very proud of that. We are celebrating our 14th year in business, and we are a learning and development company focused on employee health and well-being. And so I'm blessed that that has brought me into this safety space a variety of times and to Ohio Safety Congress many years now. So I feel really good about that. A little bit about me, my background is in health and fitness and wellness, but more specifically, I am really interested in things like behavior change. I am interested in why people do or don't do things. I'm interested in motivation and mindset. I'm interested in neuroscience and positive psychology. And I'm also interested in somatics, which is the mind-body connection. So this is where I have focused some of my professional development. So fast forward to the pandemic, and everything comes to a screeching halt and changes. And I found myself really diving into this exploration of technology and well-being, and how do we have a healthy relationship with technology, but support the health and wellness of ourselves and others, because we are consuming more technology than ever. And so the irony is, we're going to talk about some of the challenges related to over consuming technology. And so the irony is that here we are on technology, but we'll also talk about some of the beautiful things about that. And we'll also talk about ways to offset that for our teams, for ourselves, so that we are doing activities offline throughout the day and throughout the week that, again, are going to support our health and well-being. So a few housekeeping items before I get started here. As was mentioned, you are welcome to stay super active in the chat. I think this is more fun for everybody involved. If you are commenting, if you're asking questions, if you need clarifications, if something really resonates for you and you think, yes, I agree, whatever you would like to chime in with, by all means, please do. I think it's more interesting for you and for others, but just so you know, because of the awkwardness, if you will, of bouncing back and forth between slides and chat, I will be revisiting the chat at the end of the presentation to facilitate review and discussion. Also, as we go, if you're sitting there kind of shaking your head saying, well, that'll never work at our office or our workplace or our organization, you know, I am here as a consultant as well. So it's fun for everybody if we can problem solve and brainstorm a challenge that you might have in terms of implementation. My hope is that you can take things and run with it, and again, not be stuck. So here's a little bit about our content today. I like to be clear in my learning objectives. We have 3 for today. We're going to learn about something called the distraction addiction that is caused by our relationship and our consumption of technology. That will not be all doom and gloom. There's going to be some stats in there, I think, that are eye-opening, but then we're going to uncover ways to engage in current technology while still supporting integrative wellness. Now, what's integrative wellness? It is a model that we have chosen to use here at Wellness Collective. You may have heard of dimensions of wellness, This is similar but different. So we focus on 4 domains, which are mind, body, spirit, and environment. 4 really big drivers to health and well-being. And then finally, again, because I'm all about application and swinging into action, we're going to look at tactics for actually implementing the things that we're talking about. So my vision and my hope is that you can implement it into your own workday, that you can support and encourage it in the workday of your team members. And if you are touching your wellness initiative, then you'll have some things that you can share with those decision makers and for your strategy there as well. So diving into our first objective, I lead with this question. Are we all technology addicts? Well, I don't think we mean to be. I don't think it's intentional. I think life has just changed very rapidly. It really has ever since the evolution of the smartphone and all the tablets and devices we're able to be on and social media and so forth. But what's wild is being labeled as an internet addict is actually pretty easy. One must log about 30 hours a week online. So that's just roughly 5 hours a day. And so this is collectively or accumulated on all of your devices. I bet some of us could really take the cake and blow those numbers out of the water. But there are researchers and authors that have been looking at this and saying, you know, by this definition, we're all addicts, right? By Wednesday afternoon or Tuesday if it's a busy week. You know, there's a variety of reasons why we're online. You know, it's our best option right now. It's also true that we are engaging with technology personally, right? We might be playing a game on an app or talking to someone from high school on Facebook. You know, there's social and personal reasons why we're online, but then for our work, you know, the workday has evolved just tremendously. So again, I don't think this is anything to feel shameful about. It's just where we are right now. It's a very common thing. So I have been especially inspired by this book that I picked up. It's called The Distraction Addiction. I've got to read you the tagline because it makes me chuckle. It says, getting the information you need and the communication you want without enraging your family, annoying your colleagues, and destroying your soul. So this kind of made me chuckle, and I thought, I think I need this book. Because for me, and what's interesting is I picked this book up probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I was trying to figure out what's the right amount of technology to consume? How does this fit into my day? What does it look like? How do I get more of my time back, but still stay connected? And obviously this tagline I found really entertaining. So I picked this book up and was working through it. And then the pandemic came and I thought, oh, okay, yeah, we can really start to apply some of the learning. So I'm putting my spin on some of this content. I will let you know when I'm citing things from the book. These statistics did come from the book, and I have a couple of others to add to it based off a presentation I did yesterday. So in a day's work, we are averaging 110 messages. I bet for some people it is significantly more than that. We're checking our phone potentially 34 times. We are visiting Facebook or other social media platforms on average 5 times, and we're liking and scrolling for 30 minutes. I think that's a pretty conservative estimate. And we tend to hold our breath while doing so. So there is a real diagnosis called sleep apnea, right? Where people have interrupted breathing as they're sleeping. But researchers have discovered a new playful term called email apnea. But it's a real thing. They actually looked at how people were breathing or not, their rate of respiration as they were opening their inbox. And so what this researcher found is that individuals are actually holding their breath as they open the inbox. So if you take away nothing else today, I hope that you take a really deep breath in as you open your inbox. I think we are anticipating, right, what's to come when we open it. A couple of stats from yesterday, I was talking about the immune system and the benefit of getting outdoors. And so a couple of statistics I used yesterday, we spend about 93% of our time indoors, and we are online up to 10 hours a day, some people. So I think it's really, really powerful for us to look at this. and to see how it's supporting us and how it's actually working against us. Now, I mentioned that I'm interested in neuroscience. I'm interested in the brain and behavior and why we do things or don't do things. And there is something called the reward centers of the brain. And so we know that when we eat high carbohydrate foods, the receptors in the brain, they're very satisfied, and we've got feel-good hormones and all of that. But we have reward centers that are satisfied by a variety of different things. You know, it could be sugar or caffeine or carbohydrates, but we're also really rewarded in the brain when we feel liked and when we feel accepted and when we feel part of something. And so it's no coincidence that these apps and games have started giving things like badges and the ability to like or love or laugh or comment, because it really does keep you coming back for more. You know, it feels good to be liked. It feels good to be acknowledged. It feels good to be noticed. It feels good to be a part of something. So these apps are almost designed in a way to keep us coming back for more, right? And it does feel good. So then your brain starts to wonder, what am I missing out on, right? That fear of missing out. So we pop open the app. I wonder what I'm missing. I wonder if anybody has liked what I posted, and so on and so forth. So again, your brain wants to come back for more. So our entanglement, if you will, with technology just gets reinforced through repetition and through some of the development really of these apps. So we are in a place right now where, thank goodness, we are connected, yet in other ways we're disconnected. You know, I'm hearing so many things from employees, and that's why I'm grateful for what I do, but I'm also in this unique seat, right, where employees tell me exactly what's going on in their lives. And so people are in different places. Some introverts are thrilled and loving being home, but some people are saying, hey, I am real isolated and I am feeling really lonely. So even though we can be connected virtually, the human body and brain still craves real human interaction. And so if we go back to the research on internet usage and technology, it is linked with some things that we need to look at. We need to look at the linkage to things like depression, ADHD, other mental health challenges. And what I hear employers saying right now is, this has gone on for so long, this being the pandemic, how do we support people from a mental health perspective? You know, we have the employee assistance program, we have work from home that's gone on a long time, we have working parents who are trying to do it all and wear all these hats. We have people who feel lonely and disconnected. We have people who are scared. You know, there is a lot going on. And so we have to be mindful of how technology is compounding what's already a really high risk situation. So let's talk a little bit about the brain and neuroplasticity, things that I like to geek out on. So neuroplasticity is this idea that your brain can continue changing and evolving for the better. And we know that children have very plastic brains, and that's why we teach them movement and foreign languages, and their cells are rapidly dividing and they're learning things so quickly. And we used to think that children, from a development perspective, you know, they're these little sponges and their neuroplasticity is really high and we need to leverage that. Well, that is true, but we now know that even as adults, the brain can change and the brain can adapt, but it can actually adapt two different ways. So there are ways that it actually works against us, this technology and brain connection. We're going to look at that. And then later on in the presentation, I'm going to show you some ways to positively support the brain from a neuroplasticity perspective. So just some fun things. And I should preface this by saying I received a grant several years ago now where I went to Seattle and studied with a woman who is an expert and author in the area of brain-based movement and somatics. So we looked a lot at human movement, human development, and the brain and the relationship between the two. So some of this comes from my work with her as well. So in the human body, our eyes have the ability to cross the midline and track left to right. It's an important part of human development for the eyes to have that full ability to track left and right. And we know that it integrates the left and right sides of the brain. And it's good for your vestibular system, balance, proprioception, cognition, etc. So our eyes, in a healthy functioning body have a pretty wide peripheral vision, right? Like I can see all the way out here right now. But smaller screens are reducing our eye tracking. So we're looking at much smaller devices and our bodies are not functioning to their full ability left to right. It's interesting. We've also found that it makes people more socially withdrawn. Look at people at an airport or out in public, they're on their phones. Their vision is narrow, their body language reflects being entangled with the technology. It's really kind of an interesting social study. We also know that backlit screens are very stimulating. Backlit screens can disrupt our sleep cycles and our circadian rhythms, and sleep deprivation is a whole nother safety concern, right? We could put that on the lineup down the road. That would be a fun thing to dive into. And then we also know that sometimes the content on our screens is stimulating, and so that could be disruptive to us. Also worth noting is a 2012 Chinese study that linked internet addiction to a 10 to 20% shrinkage in gray matter in the area of the brain responsible for processing speech, memory, emotion, motor control, and other sensory information. So essentially it found that the more time spent online, the more the brain showed signs of atrophy. I think this is especially concerning for kids in video games. Yeah, we want to make sure their eyes are moving, and we want to make sure that their brains are developing in a healthy way. And then finally, a parallel study found that the brains of internet addicts contained abnormal white matter in the areas responsible for attention, control, and executive function. So let's just pause there a minute, because the pandemic, in my experience, is already making it difficult to focus and stay on track sometimes and to make decisions. And so you can see here that the brain is being impacted. So again, I didn't want this to seem like doom and gloom, because it's not. There's so many things we can do to offset the change in the brain, but I think this is interesting content, in my opinion, and I thought it's worth looking at because I'm all about building the why. Why do we need to do what we do? So then I asked this question: are we professional sitters too? Now, I don't know every single industry that's represented here today, so I do want to acknowledge that depending on industry, some of you are professional walkers or professional bend and lift and twisters, if you're in a manufacturing or hands-on environment. But if you're in something like, transportation or logistics, and there's a lot of sitting, or a call center, we've got some professional sitters, I think, in our industries. And that's why workplace wellness, I believe, has started to pick up ever since early 2000. So I like to look at what our ancestors used to do. I think it's really interesting. According to anthropologists, our male ancestors walked between 10 and 20 kilometers a day. You'll notice that women walked about half that amount. That's because men were traditionally hunting and women were gathering. But either way, that's roughly 12 miles a day. So our ancestors are walking 12, maybe 15 miles a day to do life. And now the current recommendation, 10,000 steps, that's about 5 miles. And that recommendation is not getting hit by most people that I'm working with in our programs. When we start a wellness program and people start to pay attention to these metrics, they're like, wow, I got like 3,000 steps today. I went to the bathroom and the printer. Some people that are in more administrative support roles. So I share all of this with you because with the evolution of technology, internet, and social media, we are moving less and less. And so that is also going to wear on us. And I mentioned we're having, a ton of conversations with employers about mental health. And while I'm not a psychotherapist and I'm not a social worker, I am a fitness expert, and I know that fitness can be profoundly beneficial to one's mood and mental health. I'm not suggesting that it's a replacement, but it's supportive. So one way we can support mental health in the workplace is by encouraging and celebrating when people are physically active. All right, let's start to uncover some solutions. I think I've made a case for us consuming a lot of technology. So how do we offset that? How do we support mind, body, spirit, and environment in our workday? and we're going to be focusing on several employer and employee solutions. The first solution I'd like to focus on is maximizing movement for your sedentary folks, mindfulness and meditation. Some of you have heard me speak on mindfulness, maybe at Ohio Safety Congress. It is continuing to be a hot topic, especially now. And the reason I lead with what I call the 3 M's, movement, meditation, and mindfulness, is not only because of the long-term benefit, but because of the short-term benefit. Think about how many times people are looking for a quick fix. It is common in our culture to want a quick fix, to look better, feel better, etc. What I can tell you is that moving your body, being more in the present moment experience, and considering a practice like meditation, all of those have an immediate feel-good benefit in the body and in the brain. And oh yeah, at the end of the day, make sure you're breathing. Breath is life. And when life gets uncomfortable, we tend to hold our breath. So here, I just wanted to look at the physiology, the mechanisms behind this benefit and what happens. Fun fact, these are actual members of my team. We got together and did a little photo shoot. But when you exercise, look at what happens in the body. We immediately have an increase of blood flow across all tissues. All right, so that's going to be good for neuromuscular system, making sure circulation and for metabolic reasons, you know, the body is moving. We see an increased production of a molecule called nitric oxide, which allows for the formation of new blood cells. Again, going to help with oxygenation of the body and brain, and going to help with removal of toxins and to better distribute hydration and nutrition. And then perhaps the most important benefit is this increase in something called BDNF, which stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And scientists call this miracle grow for the brain. Miracle grow for the brain. When we exercise and when our oxygenation goes up, and our heart and lungs are challenged, this BDNF goes up. And we know that it is incredibly supportive to our brain health and the aging brain. I've also heard some experts in things like Parkinson's and other degenerative diseases talk about how movement is really so essential because of this BDNF benefit. And this is another book I recommend and really encourage you to check out if you are interested in neuroscience and the brain. There's a brain rules for baby if you have children or grandbabies, but then there's one for adults as well. And then let's look at what happens when people start to meditate. Through time and practice and establishing a meditation routine, we see all of these benefits. And there are case studies to back this up at the national level: lower blood pressure, better ability to ease things like anxiety and depression, which are going to continue to be hot topics. Healing from illness. This is really interesting. So healing from illness and surgery. I've actually been brought in on the case management side when there has been a claim and somebody has an injury and they're a smoker. I've actually been hired to come in and do health coaching and tobacco treatment, because we know that when people are smokers or when they're stressed, it is very difficult to heal a wound or to heal from an illness. So meditation is supportive in that. It can be effective for pain management, you know, so when we're looking at things like, prescription drug abuse and so forth, this is really a powerful way to equip people to better manage their pain. There's evidence that meditation boosts immunity. Let's talk about that. That's going to be a hot topic for a while. Improved sleep. I meet a ton of people through workplace wellness that will share with me that they do not sleep well. And this seems to be a recurring issue right now. And so meditation has shown about a 60% improvement for people with insomnia. Resiliency, the ability to bounce back. And then obviously physical, mental, emotional awareness of yourself and others. People report more peace, less reactivity, less likely to lash out at someone else, and greater clarity on life situations, decision-making, etc. So I could hear potentially someone saying like, I don't know, is that spiritually appropriate? You know, is that something we bring into the workday? Is that us promoting, you know, that people should take on this spiritual practice? Meditation can absolutely be a spiritual practice, but it can also not be tied to a spiritual experience. You know, I like to say that brushing your teeth can be spiritual if that's your intention and if that's where your mind is. So meditation is really about focusing the thinking, focusing thinking and focusing the activity of the mind. So it does not have to get into any type of religious practice. I think there's a misconception there. But anyways, if you all would like to experience meditation, I'm happy to coordinate some kind of demonstration. We're not going to have time today to do all the things I have up my sleeve, but we are also working on some audio recordings so that we can be teaching people these practices. The next focus area for solutions is to connect, unplug, and recharge. So what does that look like? I think as an employer and an employee, we can support people in creating healthy boundaries with their workday. So what I'm hearing is that the lines between work and home are often blurred, and especially so now if people are working from home. And even if people aren't working from home, maybe you are back on site because of your industry, I hear from employees that there's often pressure to be available or to be on demand or to pick up. I can share my husband works in manufacturing and he's an engineer, and if equipment breaks, you know, we're getting a phone call at all hours. And obviously emergencies happen and that type of thing, but there can be a culture of call anytime or email anytime, and that can be challenging for folks. And again, we want to encourage ourselves and others to offset all the online time with downtime and ways to recover and restore. And so we're going to be looking more specifically at that. But that means getting out into nature. That means taking up hobbies and leisure activities. You know, there's a lot of evidence that Americans are not spending as much time in leisure as they would like. There's this pressure to constantly be doing work or something else, and leisure time is incredibly important, and as are hobbies and non-digital activities. We also want to balance, you know, all of the online time that we're connecting with some offline time that we're connecting. I know that's really, really hard with physical distancing recommendations right now, but my hope is that you have people in your pod, if you will, that you can spend time with. It's important for us, I think, right now to acknowledge that different personalities need different things. You know, introverts in some ways thrive with some time in personal space, but other people really do need increased social interaction to thrive. So on that note, what I'm seeing employers do is start talking about support groups and special interest groups, like whether it's a run club or a ski club, or, you know, kind of encouraging people to connect with others in the organization who have similar interests. And even if you're not getting together to do those things, you can still have a group chat. Obviously, I get that that is online, but there are ways I think that we can get creative and connect with other people. I do think there's a huge policy and procedure opportunity right here, you know, creating some healthy norms in the workday. As an example, I am an employer. I have about 25 employees, and I have made a commitment to myself and to my team that I'm not going to use text messaging as a way to ask for things and check in on things. I find that it's can be interruptive if it's not an emergency to always be texting people every single thing that's on my mind. So I'm trying to create some healthy boundaries for me and my team about the use of texting, so I'm respecting their leisure time and their home time. So that's just kind of an example. I'm also seeing that sometimes the workday is kind of rigid. I get that we have different deliverables depending on the industry, and you can't pull people off a line easily. But sometimes we need to look at things like more flexible hours or paid time for training and development. or maybe a little longer, more flexible lunch hours so that people can take care of themselves and practice self-care. I put this in here because it's a fun thought. What if we recharged ourselves as often as we did our phones? You know, people almost panic or have anxiety when they forget their phone or when their phone is dying, it's low on charge. But I don't know that we give ourselves that same urgency. So it's a good question. This I have in here to share just a little story. This is probably alarming because this is not physical distancing, right? People are more than 6 feet together, but I assure you this was about 18 months ago. We were recently talking about meditation, and so I wanted to include this. This is an actual photo from a very fast-paced, high-pressure industry that I support, and this is in New York City at the top of a high-rise. And these individuals have a lot of pressure to go, go, go because of the pace of their industry. But we have made some headway at this employer, and this is them in a 2 p.m. meditation, taking 30 minutes to take care of themselves before they get back at it. And so this is what we're talking about in terms of recharging your batteries and restoration. You know, so in the digital time, in our virtual world, you know, this can be done on your own. You know, we can come together as a group to learn these skills and practices. We can also give people access to resources, but people can do this at home in their own time. They don't need any special equipment. They need a floor and they need some knowledge and some skills, and they can practice recharging and restoring. So it's a pretty cool photo in my opinion. The last thing I wanted to touch on was finding focus and flow. You know, I think we are in a culture where multitasking is almost celebrated or high-fived or encouraged. And from a mindfulness perspective, we look at things a little bit differently. And if you actually look at human performance, there is evidence that you cannot do many things well without performance actually diminishing in one of those activities. We also know that humans can perform at high demand, high stress for only about 60 minutes, up to 90 minutes actually, before performance starts to come down. So 60 to 90 minutes is kind of the most you can ask of somebody to go really hard, and then they actually need some recovery time. This is true for athletes and corporate athletes. So we know that when people are more mindful, when they are monotasking, when they are doing one thing at a time, performance goes up, distress goes down. And I anticipate that if it's a person-to-person meeting or something, I anticipate that the satisfaction of that meeting will go up as well. And then from a safety perspective, we know that when people are aware of their actions and their environments, then that's a win as well. So I think there are some things we can do to support people in finding focus and flow, taking control of their environment. We can remove distractions from our immediate work environment. And then living in your zone of genius really has to do with flow as a psychological term. So when people are in flow, it means they're really engaged in what they're doing. And so we can do that by supporting people in knowing and understanding their strengths and giving them projects that help to put them in this state of flow. And again, reward goes up, distress goes down, and people are more engaged at work. I think I put this in here for myself, a reminder to starve distractions and feed focus. So again, I think there's a huge opportunity in our environment to tuck a phone away, turn the ringer off, those types of things to support our focus. So I know I am a little short on time and I want to be able to chat with everybody. So I'm going to try to wrap things up here in the next 5 minutes or so and shift to discussion. So I promised you very specific recommendations and takeaways that you could potentially explore. So for all the reasons I've already mentioned, we can support people in getting moving. So we can put this into practice at work. We can offer or enjoy ourselves 15 to 30-minute movement breaks. That can be led by a facilitator. This can be peer-led. You can offer virtual group fitness or mind-body classes. And at a minimum, you know, not every workday can, again, walk off the production floor and maybe take a class. However, we can encourage people to track their physical activity and report back or check in or celebrate. Heck, you can even be in a team meeting and say, hey, I encourage you all to get out with your families this weekend, take a walk or a hike, take a picture, share it with the group, anything to get people engaging with healthy habits outside of work. What we're finding during the pandemic is we can't always get people together at a common day and time, but we can give them healthy habits to practice in their own time and have them report back and share and celebrate, and that is working quite well. So my coaching question is, in what ways are you encouraging and prioritizing employee exercise or movement? And on the flip side, if you have a very, very active workforce, in what ways are you supporting them to recharge? This is a real photo from, again, a client in New York. This embodies our mission, which is health and happiness at work. But I included it because it shows camaraderie, it shows fun, it shows that these women just did boot camp, and look at how happy they are. So we know that fitness will positively impact our mood and our social connectedness. Next, you could choose to implement a formalized meditation program. Again, it would support mindfulness and safety, in my opinion. And you could offer or enjoy very short facilitated experiences. We're seeing a huge increase in this right now. These can be made available during the workday, or we can give people curriculum, apps, audio, etc., video, and teach people how to do this in their own time. As an alternative, we are also seeing a little uptick for those that do have real estate available. We're seeing an uptick in people creating and inviting space within the workplace, sort of a respite room, because again, you can have people coming in there at scheduled times. You can keep people separate, but people who need time or space for prayer or meditation or stretching or just time to process a stressful moment, you can create kind of a respite room if your space allows. This is just a team member showing a meditation pose that is more traditional. This is not how we do meditation in the workplace. I put it in here as a reminder of that. When we do meditation in the workday, we are in these clothes, we are seated in a chair, and we do not have our legs wrapped up. It can look like this, but does not have to. Another really tangible takeaway that I thought was relevant for today is to look for ways to be more healthy and mindful in your meetings. Some simple things, whether a virtual meeting or an on-site meeting, you can begin and end on time, modeling good, healthy boundaries, encouraging people to get a glass of water in between, encouraging people to take a 5-minute walk in between, giving people transition time. Begin with a breathing exercise. If you're not comfortable leading that, that's okay. There might be someone in your organization who is comfortable, or again, it could be facilitator led. You can invite people to tuck their cell phones away. It's one less distraction. Say, if you're not expecting an urgent phone call, if you're not on call, I invite you to tuck your phone away. Let's give each other our full attention. Oftentimes people will focus better. And again, you can kind of set this tone or norm of monotasking. Respect boundaries of others when calling and scheduling, and use technology only as needed, prioritizing safe, obviously, FaceTime as you're able to. So I'd encourage you to think about, in what ways are you encouraging and prioritizing a culture of wellness in day-to-day interactions and projects? Encouraging people to stand up, encouraging people to take a stretch break, like, hey, let's all just stand up, or let's dance for 5 minutes. I don't care what it is. If you're not comfortable leading these things, I can direct you to some ways to work around that. But even just encouraging people to talk about their leisure time and, hey, what did you do for physical activity this week? Just normalizing the conversation in your meetings, talking about health and wellness is powerful. So I encourage you to do that. I always like to include this slide when we're talking about mindfulness. It just shows the difference between having a really full, busy brain or mind where past, present, and future are all colliding, and all the things are happening simultaneously, as opposed to being mindful when you are aware of what's actually before you. I think that's a pretty powerful visual for safety as well. I did want to put in a couple of these slides, and I should say that you will get a copy of this if you want it. It'll be shared out. So if we don't get through everything or you're trying to take notes or screenshots, I should have mentioned this sooner, you will get a copy of this. So in this book that I recommended, there are some recommendations for how to engage with social media mindfully. I thought this was worth looking at. Really good takeaways. Remember people on the other side of the screen, live first, tweet later, really talks about being in the moment. This author also has some recommendations for taking a break, maybe once a week, taking a break from social media and just noticing, if social media is supportive to your health, great. But if it's not, and if it's working against you, then you can take a break. And he gives you some coaching for how to do that. Finally, I just wanted to recap with some ways to create new norms. I fully believe there's opportunity to model self-care as the norm, as a leader. When you show that you're taking care of yourself and share it with others, it can be incredibly inspiring to them and even give them permission to do the same. Moving toward mindfulness as the norm, again, this idea of monotasking, of being fully present. The idea of healthy boundaries as the norm, encouraging people to end their workday, encouraging people to get outside and do other things, encouraging people not to work at odd hours. And then finally, supportive programming. And that could be a whole nother deep dive, lots of ways to layer programming into the workday. This is just a placeholder to let you know that we are hosting a one-day conference that's been rescheduled from January to April. And this is a one-day event in the Columbus area where we talk about health and happiness at work. So a full day of workplace wellness. I would love to see you there. Tickets are on Eventbrite. And then I also have a gift. So I am currently writing several books. It feels scary to share that with the world, but it's on my heart and on my mind. And so one of the topics I'm focusing on is called The Well Leader. Win the workday, slay self-care, and support others along the way. If you're interested in what this is about and some personal and professional development, I have a free 5-day introduction to it. And this is the link if you would like to enroll. You can just use the green link down there. And then we are going to shift gears to chat. And I do have in this deck my personal email. I love hearing from you all afterwards. And then also I would love to connect on LinkedIn. You can find me there. So I'm going to stop the screen share in this moment. I am curious if anything has come into the chat.
It has. We have a couple good questions. Some came to the whole group, and then some I have a couple just from folks. So the first one is, what kind of walking program at the workplace do you see succeed with professional sitters?
So what I see doing very, very well are 8-week step challenges. It's funny, we've been doing these for years and years and years now, and they are still doing well. And I think for a few reasons. First and foremost, it's very low barrier to entry. Not everybody is a runner, and not everybody is comfortable going to a gym or fitness center. So step programs, walking programs and challenges where people track and report either their number of steps, their minutes of steps, or their distance. I tend to give people 3 categories, so there's no barrier. And they just self-report. That still does really, really well. And there was just a study done, and this was done by the American Council on Exercise. And what they found is that the #1 way to support behavior change is self-monitoring. So what that means is when people track what they're doing, they track their behaviors, they are more likely to adopt a new, healthier habit and to make a change because they are engaged, they're paying attention. And so accumulating steps or minutes or distance is very doable and approachable, low barrier to entry, and it continues to do well. I'm gonna hop back over. I didn't know if you were gonna feed me questions or if I can.
Yep, walking versus running, which is more beneficial, or which would you recommend?
I work with this very wide population in workplace wellness. We have people who physically cannot get up and down off the floor. And then I've got people who are Ironman athletes. So I am of the mindset that we need to get people moving. I'm not going to dictate what that looks like. And so we also recommend physical activity challenges where it can be any type of activity. It can be anything that's physically active. So we give people qualifiers like it must increase your heart rate and your respiration to be counted as physical activity. But by that definition, if people are doing rigorous housework, yard work, we all know that's work, right? So it's also beneficial to just do a general physical activity challenge, or what we call a PAC, physical activity challenge, to encourage people like, hey, did you know the recommendation is to accumulate 150 minutes a week? Let's work toward that and then celebrate going beyond. So rather than recommend anything in particular, again, my audience is so wide, I want to celebrate any and all movement.
Awesome. Okay. Another question, what kind of exercises would you encourage to introduce these concepts to your team if they have a low self-awareness or low experience with mindfulness?
Okay, so it sounds like, how do we get started when people haven't done this before? They might check out a little bit, so I would approach it a couple of ways. Workplace wellness is generally, it's required that it's voluntary, right? Now there are some workarounds there depending on your strategic goals. So I think the best approach at first, if you're anticipating some resistance or walls up, would be to make it voluntary and to make it a short experience so that people are not, bound to something for an hour and they're really uncomfortable. Make it a 5 or 10 minute experience. Take some time to lay the groundwork for the why. These are some of the health benefits. These are the reasons why we're trying this. Totally voluntary. See what you think, see how you feel, and then offer something small and experiential. So oftentimes people read in a magazine or read an article about the benefits of something, but if you can get them actually doing it and embodying it, oftentimes they'll find like, wow, I enjoyed that, or wow, I've never done that before. So it gets them into trying something before just writing it off. And what we know about human motivation is that it is profoundly affected by confidence. If somebody believes that they are not able to do something, they will not go there. They will not try it. They will not quit smoking if they think they can't. So confidence is incredibly important. So we want to make things very doable, very digestible, and then show people that they can, they can do it. I think for some of these things, if you don't have someone internally, that can facilitate it, it can be less awkward for people to have a third party or a facilitator just to build that trust and rapport. But it could be that you have somebody internally that's comfortable and trained and able to do it. Sometimes employees even want to volunteer, if they're in school for something similar. So I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah, no, good. Absolutely. Start small. Right?
Recommend, a lunch and learn or a one-time program is great, but you can just dip your toe in the water. A 4-week, we call it a campaign, like a 4-week initiative. Like, hey, for the month of February, we're going to explore this. Here's one thing each week to learn, to try, just to kind of have some consistency and see if you can perk people's ears up a little bit to it.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. Any suggestions on apps or ideas for virtual workers for meditation or mindfulness at home?
Yes. So some of the apps that are really well received, one is called Headspace, and another is called Calm. And those are probably the two Headspace and Calm are probably the two most downloaded. So I would encourage you to look at those. I believe those are both completely free.
Okay, awesome. I know I found one, I have to see what it is, but it was through a university, UCLA Mindful, that seems pretty good.
Okay, so there's also a phenomenal website and organization. It's called the Greater Good Science Center at the University of Berkeley. And they also have a ton of mindfulness resources on their website that are free.
Awesome. All right. There's another question in here, and it says, with this pandemic, some workers are dealing with anger and high emotional stress towards their company and other personnel. Not that it's personal, it's just highly stressful, knowing that you have potential to test positive, fear, the unknown. Any tips on helping to deal with anxiety, especially on the anger side of the spectrum?
Yeah, I think it seems like right now people really need to let it out, right? But what's a healthy way to do that? Obviously, if you have an EAP program, we're seeing that the utilization in those is really higher than ever. What we're seeing an increase in is health coaching and providing employees with a safe space for them to let it all out and to talk about what's going on personally, professionally, with their health, with their stress, to not only talk about coping, healthy coping strategies, because let's be honest, there are a lot of really unhealthy coping strategies that people can lean on, right? Gambling, overeating, over drinking, drug abuse. So when people aren't feeling well in their mind or body, they want something that will support them in feeling better. And if they don't have resources in place, they're going to default to these unhealthy coping mechanisms. So I think talking about healthy ways to cope, healthy ways to, or healthy benefits that you have available to them. You know, sometimes people still don't realize what's included in their benefits. But then again, we're seeing this increase in health coaching so that people can have a private space to chat one-on-one with somebody that feels private and supportive. And then again, as I mentioned, I do see some employers looking at support groups and things. And then we're also seeing an uptick in stress and resiliency programming, just talking to people about, and these are the signs and symptoms of chronic stress, and these are other ways to cope.
Awesome. All right. Well, the last one that I have is, can you give us like a 15, 20-second example on a breathing exercise that folks can use at the beginning of a meeting or even right now for us?
Yes, and I so wish I'd cut something else out so that I could do more hands-on with you and practice what I preach, right? So in this moment, go ahead and I'm going to try to turn my camera. Put one hand on your belly. And when I say belly, it's low. It's not your belly button. It's below your navel. So one hand goes below your navel and the other hand rests on your heart, okay? And so this is a tactile cue to your body and to your central nervous system. You're kind of waking up that part of the body just by touching it, right? So one hand low on the belly, one hand on the heart. The objective is to breathe through the nose. We have the ability to breathe through the mouth, but it's more stimulating to the central nervous system. So you're inhaling and exhaling through the nose. And the first step is to just feel what's happening beneath your hands. You know, maybe as you're breathing, you're feeling a tiny bit of movement. Maybe you're not. It's not a thing to judge. It's a thing to notice. So as you're inhaling and exhaling through the nose, see what it would look like or feel like for both hands to just fill a little bit with breath. So if you take a deep belly breath, let your belly relax, you might notice that bottom hand moves. But then as you continue breathing, see if you can breathe so deeply that you also get some movement in your top hand. And we'll take maybe 3 more breaths, just exploring what it looks like, what it feels like when we're able to breathe into the belly and when we're able to create lift underneath each hand. As an alternative, it is okay to inhale through the nose and to exhale through the mouth. But we really want to focus the inhale through the nose for the relaxation response in the body and in the brain. And then you can just relax your hands into your lap. So that's just a simple way, to create some mind-body awareness. And you will kind of notice if you're in a room with people that the energy of the room kind of calms down.
I feel it now. That was awesome. You have such a great voice for that too. That is wonderful.
Funny you said that, because my goal this year is to do some recordings for this kind of thing. So
perfect. Absolutely. Absolutely. I have no more questions. Sally, did you receive any questions that didn't come to the main group or that I wouldn't have got? If she
No, I
does
didn't
not.
receive anything else. That was actually my question, asking for the sample breathing exercise. I think we should do it before every meeting.
I agree. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you, Katy. I know they're like applauding loudly or at least calmly now that they had a good breathing exercise. We really appreciate you being here. That was phenomenal. Everybody just know February 17th is our next meeting. And actually, it's kind of a continuation on this topic. We're going to be talking about self-care and resiliency and building a resilient workforce. So it's going to be, it's smooth. It fits right into it. So I think a breathing exercise definitely will be called for at the beginning of next month. So Katy, we thank you so much. If anybody has any questions, feel free to continue to type that in